Hello and welcome to Take a Beat. My name is Tirza and I'm part of the pastoral staff here at IES. And Take a Beat is an IES podcast where we invite you to take a little break, talk about things that matter, only to launch ourselves back on the beat. So I have Pastor Dave here with us. Welcome.
You don't want me to sing, right?
You can if you want to.
Well, I was singing before we came in, and everybody was laughing. So
No,
I'm
we can
deeply
actually
offended.
keep that in the recording. Everyone's already rolling. No, yeah, actually, I think we have quite a few footages of you singing.
Uh-oh.
Before or after or somewhat during our podcast.
I sang at my wedding.
Ooh!
My wife didn't sing. I sang.
Wow! What did you sing?
It's a wedding song by a guy named Don Francisco.
Okay.
It's a nice song.
Wow.
Yeah, my wife always had to sing at things, and she didn't want to sing at the wedding, and so I surprised her.
Hey.
But she wasn't surprised.
I don't think it's very. I don't think she gets surprised very easily.
And they don't do weddings in the Philippines without singing. So,
Ah.
yeah.
Okay. Well, welcome, PD. Thank you
It's
for
good to be here.
joining us. This is actually us wrapping up. We've been having a series on technology and kind of living in a world with technology. And I wanted to chat with you about church online and in a digital setting. So, yes.
My autocorrect on my email is actually, it's my WhatsApp. It's actually hallucinating. So you've heard of AI hallucination?
Uh-huh.
My autocorrect is hallucinating.
Oh.
I clearly wrote in a message to my niece who's coming to visit that you go past customs, and it changed it, and I didn't notice until she remarked it. It changed customs to tacos. They're not even close.
No.
Yeah, that's hallucination. Anyway, sorry about that.
No. But tacos would be nice.
I was kind of hoping that would be the food provided for me today, but I guess not.
No, it's breakfast, so it's McDonald's.
I like breakfast tacos.
I do too, actually. Wait, you're giving me ideas.
I had sashimi tacos last night.
Oh.
Oh, man. Little tiny tacos with sashimi in it. I can't tell you what restaurant in Jakarta, Jalan Senopati, that was, because it might be an unsolicited plug, but man, oh man, it was really good. It was really good. It just reminds me of Pancasila. Anyway.
Okay. We'll let people decipher that for themselves.
I didn't want to make it too hard.
So, PD, IES started, like a lot of churches, started going online. Actually, we had already had plans to go online when the pandemic broke out, right?
Absolutely. That was another one of the... So just to back pass a little bit, we had the guy that... I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. I didn't know we were going this direction. But the guy who handles YouVersion, he's
Yes.
the CEO of YouVersion. And he visited Jakarta, did some stuff, and he had lunch with all of us in IES. And he also was telling us about... it's from Life Church, and it's also the name.online.church. And at that point, they had 10,000 churches online. And they were using it primarily in Life Church. And he gave the explanation that they have, in addition to 30,000, 40,000 people that are their simultaneous services in different locations, they had like 100,000 people online, and he explained how they did it. And then I asked the question, well, is that the same thing as people in attendance? And he said he gets that question all the time, and he said, and this is the best answer I've heard, and it's a good answer because he's a smart guy. He said it's not the same thing, but it's also not nothing. And I thought that was really good. So while he was there with one of his staff, Pastor Mario from IES Kalapagati, talked to the staff guy, found out all the details of how things were done. And Pastor Mario went out and under another things, he signed up like Gereja Online, all this kind of stuff. And then he started doing a curated service out on Greja Online, grejaonline.church. Yeah. And so he was telling me what a good idea it was, and I thought, well, we could do that, because my idea would be that we would record the Saturday service and clean it up if we needed to, and then we could launch it at the same time on Sunday. And the very first Saturday that we were scheduled to do it was the very first Saturday we couldn't have church because of COVID.
Yeah, I think it's March 12th or something.
Yeah, it's like a God thing, right? And so anyway, we were ready. So when we found out on Monday that we wouldn't be able to have church in person, we were already prepared to record the Saturday service. So we just did the service without a crowd, and it worked out really, really well for us. It made us look well prepared, but it was a God thing.
Definitely. But I think one of the things that is interesting about how IES is doing it now is, even after the pandemic, a lot of churches have already stopped doing online services because people can go to church, go back to church in person. But we're still doing online, which I'm grateful for, because it's part of my job.
That's right.
But why? Can you explain a little bit why we decided to do?
Well, one of the interesting things that we've known all along in IES is our people travel a lot. And because of that, a lot of our people are traveling all the time. And we have the statistic now that we know the numbers, and we have a pretty accuracy. I think we're at about 85% check-in rate and everything else, which is a very high sample. And what it tells us is that of all the people who are currently going to IES, 40% of them come once a month. Now that means that they're not able to come, or they're out of town or something like that. It's 40% once a month, 60% twice a month, 80%, it's an interesting statistic because it grows up like. And that means that they're not around. And as it turns out, I know a lot of people who come in person when they're here, but they travel, or they have family events or different things like that. And so they go online. And so we very much consider it an important part of what we do.
Yeah.
And because we're online on those platforms twice, there's a live stream, which I'm old enough I call it simulcasting. And actually, I heard a famous preacher. He was at this Pentecostal Word Conference where my wife and I were, and he used the word simulcast for live streaming. And I thought, he's as old as I am. Anyway, and then it's available on YouTube, and we get a lot of views, and some of them we get an awful lot.
Yeah.
And so that leads me to believe that not all of those views are people watching the whole thing, but significant portions of it are watched, which means it's actually a very successful, we have a Saturday night crowd, and then we have a Sunday morning crowd at 9:30, a crowd at 11:30, a crowd at 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon for a encounter, and then we have an online crowd.
That's right.
And they're a real congregation of the church. We have to relate to them differently, and we access them differently, but they're a real congregation of the church, and you're their pastor. And so that's what part of this is about, obviously. So that's why we wouldn't stop. There's no reason to stop. We have a service anyway by recording it. Actually, we just found a bunch of the old VCDs from early UOB and late Stocko days. And so now we've had access to maybe 150 different, or maybe not that many, but quite a few of the services going all the way back. And we have, since Stocko days, we've recorded at least one service because we want to know, what happened and things like that. And also, we had a case where somebody kind of slandered us about some things that they said were said in the service. And it turned out we had a copy of what was really said, and that helped us a lot.
Yeah.
Because they said something highly critical in the press about something that they said we said. And we reached out to them and said, we're sorry that you misunderstood it that way. And, no, I didn't misunderstand. And then, I think in that case we only had the audio. But we were able to prove we hadn't said what they said. And so that's valuable from that perspective. Since we have it anyway, we might as well put it online.
Yeah. And I think even for a while in UOB, we would publish the message, the sermons.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, and when you talked about us having an online congregation, our online congregation are people from all over the place. From now I'm blanking, but there's people from Hong Kong.
Yeah. There's regular people from all over.
Yeah,
and there are
Japan.
people that check in from places we shouldn't mention.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting. Yeah. So I'm assuming when they check in, I'm assuming they're coming in through a VPN, and then they tell us where they're from.
Yeah.
And that's good too. We want to make that as a resource that's available. And look, it's just a part of the church. We don't want to overplay its significance, but we don't want to underplay its significance. A lot of times people try and assign value to things that a church does according to some kind of a ratio of how many people participate and things like that. When you have restricted resources and restricted availability of space or things like that, those things are necessary. But IES is in a pretty good location. We have resources that we need to have to be online.
Yeah.
There's no reason that we would ever cut it back.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question. So during the pandemic, I had a lot of time on my hands, and so
did everybody.
Yeah. And so I even I was looking at different things, even VR, and so there are things like VR churches, and I even attended the services, and it felt like normal service, just virtual, and everyone else is an avatar. I think there was a point where I think I had a discussion. I'm pretty sure Andreas was in the room as well. I think Andreas was the one who brought it up, but I'm still thinking about it even now. There are people who are like, oh, I got baptized virtually. Is that like what do you think about that?
Well, so I would say, okay, a couple of things, the whole VR experience is kind of an interesting thing, and I'm not current with a lot of technology, but I do pay a little bit of attention because we not only have the virtual reality churches where you can go in and so on, and one of the famous organizations in the world that runs different kinds of media, famously a few years ago claimed that this sort of virtual reality was going to be the next big thing. And of course it collapsed, and it hasn't become the next thing. But there's also the whole enhanced reality thing, where you can do, for instance, you could do enhanced reality in a church where people could, by pointing their camera, for instance, or their glasses eventually at some kind of a token on the side of it, they would be able to have other kind of things play out. Yeah. You could have your outlines dangling in the sky or whatever.
Yes.
I think we should explore all kinds of things. I would have to think carefully about virtual reality water baptism.
Yeah.
But when you recognize that water baptism is intended to be a public declaration of your faith, I can see how you might be able to find a way in which there might be something like that, and so I wouldn't say, that's terrible. We had a lot of issues during the COVID because there were branches of the church that weren't allowed to have communion because there were certain branches that felt that there has to be a certain level of consecration of the elements, and that couldn't be consecrated virtually.
Online, yeah.
And even within denominations, there was, one of the Archbishop of Singapore, if I have this information correctly, did not allow virtual communion, and the Archbishop in Sydney, I think, or Melbourne, did.
Yeah.
So you have even that discussion within particular denominations.
Okay.
And so I wouldn't want to be out front on it. But I wouldn't be afraid of being out front of it. Yeah. But I want to study it and maybe talk to some people who really study some elements of Scripture, because I'm a pastor. I'm not a Bible scholar, and so I think it would be an interesting discussion to have.
Yeah.
But if we can do communion virtually, why couldn't somebody who might be in a situation in a place, like for instance somebody who might be in prison, in solitary confinement, and they come to know Jesus through an online methodology, why wouldn't you allow them to be baptized? There probably are arguments about that.
Yeah.
And that's obviously an extreme case. But I've baptized people that were in bed that were dying that wanted to be baptized.
Yeah.
And that's not, obviously, that's not immersion. I'd get kicked out of the ICU. So why wouldn't we find a way if that was the only option? Or would we just say, God knows your heart and you're not allowed, you can't be baptized because of these kind of things? That would be a possibility too. It'd be a great discussion to have.
Yeah. I mean, in Indonesia, it's also just like the next step is it's with Indonesia, you have to have the baptism certificate and all of that because it's a legal document.
Well,
right?
and for a lot of churches in Indonesia, it's also membership.
Yeah.
So when you get, in Malaysia and Singapore too, when you get baptized, you become a member of that church. In fact, I know of small churches in Malaysia where people have become members of that church. They were baptized in that church, and they have to spend the rest of their life tithing to that church. And so you
even
end
if
up,
you're not
right,
even
you
physically
go move,
there,
you go live in another country. And I've heard stories of Malaysians that migrated to the UK, and 20 years later, they're still sending their tithe back to their little church in their small town, which is kind of interesting. I can kind of see something interesting, but I'm not sure that I would fully endorse the idea.
So let me ask you about.
We're going a long way in a lot of different directions.
Yeah, well,
that's what you get with me.
We are. Well, that's why I don't really have a plan for this conversation. Like, one of the things that I'm thinking about with online too is we don't usually emphasize a lot of giving when we talk online. So when someone
we actually do everything we can to not mention it.
No. So when someone attends IES online, what do you think? How should they give? Because giving is a part of who we are as followers.
Well,
of
one thing that I found was really interesting is that obviously if they investigate IES and they go to our webpage, then there's a way to give on our webpage. And the amount of money that's been given through our website is actually increased. So there are people, I mean, in the earliest days for the first, I don't know, maybe year or so, it was like 0.5% of our total giving was that way. Now it's quite a bit more. And so that's positive. But, like I remember one person that I knew that when we had a message about giving, and it was a balanced message about giving, they said that they increased their donation every time they bought groceries. There's a donation place at their grocery store for a food bank. So they made a decision to increase the amount they donated every time they bought groceries. That's great.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to people to give. And our message is about being generous. It's not necessarily about specifically IES.
Yeah.
So we're very, very happy. I mean, IES people are very generous. They're faithful to follow the church. And there are always limitations about what we can do by resources. So if people would give more, we would spend it well and wisely. But we also want people to be generous in other ways and not just about how much money they give to IES. We could change the whole topic here. We could run down the money giving thing.
That's not. I think it's too early for that conversation. Okay. Yeah, because I think what I always say to the online congregation is if you would like to give to the Lord through IES, here's the webpage. But we do just encourage people to look around them and where they're at.
Well, correct me, because I want to make sure I'm right or wrong on this. In a part of the service, we have a short video every week where I talk about the whole area of giving and everything else. Am I correct that that's edited out of the online version?
So the live stream has that.
Yeah. The simulcast.
The simulcast has that on Saturday nights, but on Sunday we actually edit it out.
Yeah. We don't want people to think that, a long time ago, when IES was planting churches, a guy accused me that we were planting churches because we're trying to get money for the central church. I was really offended by that. And we wouldn't want people to think that our purpose in having an online church is to get more money for anything. However, being generous is absolutely critical for a Christian life. It's one of the it's one of the ways that we reflect the character of God. And so we want people to be generous, and if they want to give to the whole ministry of IES, we're enthusiastic about that. But if they just become more generous in their own local giving, that's great too.
And I think for me, I think when I was in college for a little while, I still gave to IES because I wanted to know that the place where I was giving was dealing with the money correctly and in a way that I trust is being dealt well.
Yeah.
And so I remember when I was in college, that's what I did, because also I wasn't familiar with a lot of the churches then, especially in the beginning when I was only there for a year or two. Yeah.
Look, we have this has turned into giving, but we have very, very, very careful rules about how money is handled in IES. I don't handle church money at all. Somebody asked me the other day, this just immediately happened. They said, I have something I would like to give to the church. And I said, I cannot accept this. And if you would like to give it to the church, then you need to contact the office or somebody like that. But I was helping them with something spiritual. And I said, but you need to understand that me ministering to you has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
And I absolutely will not handle it. And I think that's kind of unusual, but we think it's important. You know, so many ministries have been destroyed over the way money's not handled well.
Absolutely.
And so we don't want to fall into that.
So kind of going back to the whole online thing. PD, this world today is very connected, very much online. I feel like it's a simultaneous reality between like the actual in-person physical world and the virtual world with social media and everything. So what do you think is the role of the church in a generation that is so well connected?
I think number one, I think we can't abandon the public space. I'm very, very well aware. I told you my autocorrect is hallucinating, and there's another interesting thing going around that some businesses are finding that some of their executives are being blackmailed by the AI devices in their company.
Oh.
So when the AI seems to feel that, and I'm not assigning personality to these machines. I'm just saying that when the prompt for the AI is to protect the company, they don't mind pointing out to people that we know you're doing things in violation of the company if you don't do what we want,
Yeah.
And so if the church abandons the public square with all the information, all the technology and everything else like that, we've abandoned the space.
Yeah.
The early church, when the disciples, as we're all reading Acts together, when the disciples started by going into cities, they went to the synagogues where they knew they had the most culturally in common, and they would be given an opportunity as a guest to share. But they attacked all of the spaces. The Apostle Paul, one of the great things about going to Athens is to go to Mars Hill.
Yeah.
And the Apostle Paul was there, and the more we know about it historically, the more we realize it wasn't just a place that he went to try and make a speech, but he was kind of maybe a little bit on trial. He was in a place of critical reasoning, but he didn't abandon that space.
Yeah.
And the worst thing for us would be to abandon all of these new technology things. In reading, I love to read news, and my news feed is really eclectic, and there's more evidence today to support the idea that I think a lot of people have, that we don't really know what's happening in the different wars that are happening.
Yeah.
Because you get completely different results, but it also has to be a place of truth and veracity.
Yeah.
Because the world isn't going that way.
Yeah.
And so, we get to a place where reality supposedly doesn't exist. And the church is the place where we believe that there are absolutes.
That's right.
Not everything's absolute, but we believe an absolute right and absolute wrong. We believe the Word of God is true. It doesn't just contain a truth.
Yeah.
It's a reflection of the lawgiver who is true. And so we need to bring that into the public square.
Yeah. And I think, I love what you say, that we can't abandon it. And I think sometimes the temptation is to abandon it because we're afraid of it. So how do you, how do you use AI? I'm curious.
I don't use it at all.
Okay.
Absolutely, I don't. And the reason I don't is, and I'm not speaking against anybody else, right? But the reason I don't is because, number one, I don't want to use something I don't really understand. and I'm going to use it. If I use it to understand it, then I'm going blindly into something. I have conversations with people. We have some people in our church who use it quite extensively. We're hoping in the future to present some things for parents, because I used to be a real science guy and all that kind of stuff, and the older I get, the less I am of that. But I have a feeling I know a lot more about it than most parents, and a lot of people play with it and everything else like that. Parents, I don't think, know what restrictions they need to have for their kids. I know AI is extremely scary, and there's a lot of potential for abuse, but every technology has enormous potential for abuse.
That's right.
So the church needs to figure out what's right and what's wrong. People have asked me this question: what do you think about pastors or preachers using AI to prepare their sermons? I don't know what I think about other people doing it. I won't do it. And I may change my mind at some point, but let me explain it to you. I don't think it's cheating. Some of the best sermons I've ever gotten, I got from hearing somebody else and saying, yeah, he did that wrong. There's a better way to do that. But when I prepare a message, I engage personally with the text. And in the process of that, and Gordon Fee told me years ago, I was talking to him about some problems with preaching and stuff. He said, you need to deal with the text enough that the text impacts your life. Don't ever preach a sermon where the text hasn't impacted you.
Yeah.
Then you're just playing a game. And I think that would be the problem for me with using AI to prepare a sermon. I would let the text be impacted, the AI agent or whatever would do that deal, and then it would summarize everything for me. And it may be correct, but it hasn't impacted me.
Yeah.
It's like, so.
Yeah, no, I that's me as well. I love to write, and I love to write my thoughts, and even just my personal creative writing. I don't want AI or even someone else to I guess change what is creatively from me. So even when I preach, it has to, like you said, it has to go through me, has to impact me first before I can even just share it with other people. And so I think it's very interesting what you said, that the church needs to kind of tackle the technology that we have and figure out what's right and what's wrong. Because I think another challenge is for maybe because people are unfamiliar with the new technology, and so they just don't approach it, or they skate with this is what we've always done, and so we don't go in and reevaluate all of these new technology that's coming in.
And I think that's a mistake, because the church needs to understand what's happening in the world. And not adopt everything just for the sake of adopting something new, but to be able to be aware and to have people who understand the things that are going on.
So one last question, PD. So there are a lot of people who are like, oh, okay, like I'm an introvert, or I'm really more comfortable attending online. So I'm actually, there's nothing that is preventing me to go in person, but I just opt to go online. What do you say to people about that?
So I will start off by answering that directly, because I don't want to lose track. But this may sound a little harsh. But we don't go to church to satisfy ourselves and to feed ourselves. We go to be a part. You don't ask the question, if I'm there, I may not get anything. The question you should be asking is, would there be somebody there that I can give them something? Yeah. And so it's true. I really enjoy an online service. I really enjoy an online sermon. And so I can be benefiting from that. But by the same token, that's not really what the church is all about. I'll use an example. Pastor Lou had some people who, during COVID, they told him, we've been attending your online service, and now we're going to switch to another church, and we're going to go join XXX church, because they've got great music, they got great preaching, blah blah blah. So bye, and that's harsh. I mean, I appreciate that they told him and everything else. Yeah, then like a few weeks later, one of their family members died. Yeah. And their virtual church couldn't do a funeral. And in fact, they reached out to Pastor Lou. And I told Lou, you should have told him, go contact your new church. But Lou was much more gracious and did the funeral for the family and everything else. But see, that's, like I try and go to every 5 o'clock service on online.church because I have people that I know that I care about, that I love, and I'm so excited when I'm online with them. I only get to be there for like 5 minutes, and I think everybody's wondered, Pastor Dave's sitting in front of me and he's playing with his phone the whole time, the service is getting started. But
I think people think that about me in the 9:30 service because I always have my phone on me.
But that's why I'm there, because I care about those people and I want to interact with them. It makes me feel good to know that they're there. I want that to be my presence there. Not that I'm there to get something, but I'm there to give something. Yeah. And when I travel, I always get up early and everything and go to the service. And that's the real issue. Now, for those people who have a hard time getting there physically, they're not able to travel as well, or timing is difficult, or people from homes where they're the only believers, or people in countries where there are no churches. We have all of those, and it's extremely valuable for them. Yeah. But I know a lot of people in IES who will tell me, "Oh, Pastor Dave, I watched the YouTube of the service on Tuesday. Yeah, that was a good point," and it's helpful for them too. So
yeah, I like that.
Is this where I sing? No, I'm just kidding.
Would you like to?
No, I don't want to sing. I don't want to sing. No singing, no singing, no singing.
Wait, we can always play that all of the blooper reels we have. I think there's one of you and Pastor Mike singing too.
Well, that would be a good one. Who's doing the harmony and who's doing the melody?
I don't remember. I need to revisit.
I can't do harmony. I don't have the tools for it.
Well, thank you so much, PD, for that. That's, I think, a good discussion to have, and I think it answered a lot of people's questions that people have even asked me throughout the years, like, why are we still doing online, things like that. So thank you so much for sharing.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, we will always welcome you and your singing.
And I'm always happy to come as long as I get a good Egg McMuffin.
Oh, yep. It's there.
All right.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week on another episode of Take a Beat. Don't miss a beat.